Hi, this is Chris, and we are taking a look at questions 4, 5, 6, and 7 from Section 4 of SAT Practice Test 2. And for questions 4 and 5, they both share the information seen here, where it says the amount of money a performer earns is directly proportional to the number of people attending the performance. The performer earns $120 at a performance where 8 people attend. Now we'll take a look at the questions. Question 4 reads, how much money will the performer earn when 20 people attend a performance? So, pop quiz. Do you remember what we talked about in question 2 regarding proportions? And if you haven't looked at a video explanation of that question, then check that out, because this is actually going to be the same thing. We are given 3 numbers, and we are asked for a fourth. So remember that when 3 values are given and you're asked for the unknown, this is our standard question structure for a proportion. So look for that, 3 given and 1 unknown. Anytime you see it, think proportion to yourself. And we're going to set up our proportion here. So you earn $120 per 8 people, and if it's proportional, you just line up the corresponding kinds of units. So in this case, that means it's going to be X dollars for 20 people. So that's the only key with the proportions. When you have a directly proportional relationship like this, just make sure that the appropriate units are aligned. It's dollars, dollars in our numerators, people, people. The ratios, dollars over people, dollars over people. Just make sure everything is aligned properly so that you match up those units correspondingly. And then it's just simple cross multiplication. So here you cross multiply, you get 8x equals 2400. Divide by 8, x equals 300. Answer choice C. Let's move on to question 5. The performer uses 43% of the money earned to pay the costs involved in putting on each performance. The rest of the money earned is the performer's profit. What is the profit the performer makes at a performance where 8 people attend? So first we have to know the dollar amount for this performance where 8 people attend. And remember, it is related back to this information. It's actually surprising how common it is and how easy it can be. A lot of times when there's a set of information that applies to more than one question, a lot of people use that information in answering the first question in that question set. And then by the time they get down here to that next question, all of a sudden they've forgotten that there's this pertinent information above, and they treat it as if it's a brand new question and there's information missing. So just make sure that if there is information applying to more than one question, that you keep that in mind when you move to the later questions in that small question set. So here, 8 people attend, double check, yep, 120, okay, good. Let's write that value down here. So this is going to be 120. Now there are 2 ways to approach this. It says that they use 43% of the money in order to pay the costs involved in putting on each performance. So you can calculate this by taking 43% of 120. And if you do that calculation, so then you'll get that comes out to 5160. So 120 times 0.43 would give us 5160. And if you look, you see 5160 as an answer choice, but, careful. We need to make sure we're looking at what the question's asking. They want to know the profit. So 43% is what's used up, and it says the rest of the money earned, the rest is the profit. So we would have to then do a second step and do 120 minus 5160 in order to solve for the profit. And when we do that, we get 6840 as our result. Now there is another way to approach this, and this is something that's really helpful to keep in your toolbox whenever you're dealing with a percent change that's asking for a remaining amount or a new amount. So the way we just wrote it out is what we see students do most commonly. However, we can also do it by looking at the remaining percentage, and sometimes that's an easier calculation. So here, a lot of people will take what's used, and then in finding what the rest is, you can always, for any percentage, subtract from 100. So if you do 100% minus 43%, you're left with 57%. And then you can do 120 times 0.57 and get your answer that way. And if you do that calculation, it comes out to be 6840. So either way will get you to the correct answer, but it is important to have more than one way to see percent changes since they are so common on SAT. And this is a really great way of understanding and conceptualizing percent change to add to your toolbox when you have those questions. Let's take a look at question 6. So here it says, when 4 times the number x is added to 12, the result is 8. What number results when 2 times x is added to 7? So this just involves taking the words that they give us in this word problem, and we're going to need just about all of them, and we're going to convert that into a mathematical equation. So here it says 4 times the number x, and the way we write that when you have a number times a variable, you just write the number and the variable after it. This is written as 4x is added to, that means plus 12. The result is, whenever you see is, think equals. Is means equals. It's a very simple thing, easy to learn and memorize, but it comes up a lot, and it's really important SAT-wise to make sure we can make that conversion from the word is into the corresponding equal sign when they're describing an equation in words. So it is 8. What number results when 2 times x is added to 7? Well, before I do anything else, I have enough information just right here to solve for x, so I want to go ahead and take advantage of that. Here, I subtract 12 from both sides. I get 4x equals negative 4. Divide by 4. X equals negative 1. Now let's check out that second part of the question. The one thing to be careful of, so often I see students do this and then pick answer choice A, which would be incorrect. We want to avoid that mistake. Just remember, double check, triple check, however many times you got to do it just to make sure. But please, please, please keep an eye on what the question is asking. We don't want to take our math knowledge and the time we've spent working something out correctly and then pick an answer choice that's not really answering the question when we've actually done the math correctly. So we get x equals negative 1, that's correct, but the question wants to know this right here. What number results when 2 times x is added to 7? So here they're telling us that we have 2 times x that's being added to 7, and if we know x is negative 1, we do 2 times negative 1, which is negative 2, plus 7, that gives us 5. So key part to the question right here, make sure you're actually answering the question that's being asked. You're not always going to be just solving for a variable on its own, but sometimes they will have a second part to the question where they ask you to manipulate that variable in some way like they do here. All right, let's take a look at number 7, last question on this page. And it says y equals x squared minus 6x plus 8. The equation above represents a parabola in the xy plane. Which of the following equivalent forms of the equation displays the x-intercepts of the parabola as constants or coefficients? So whenever they say x-intercepts, and they're asking you how you can manipulate an equation to show x-intercepts. So here, when you see that, I want you to think fully factored form. So basically it just means that in order to identify the x-intercepts, you're going to set that quadratic equal to 0. And when you set it equal to 0, your x-intercepts occur when y is 0. And if you think about solving a trinomial like this, something we're very comfortable with is this type of structure, where we have 0 equals, and then we're going to have these couple of binomial factors, so x plus something or minus something or whatever the case may be. And that's exactly what we're going to look for here, which means if you know that structure, you don't even have to factor this. We're going to factor it to make sure our factoring skills are on point. But if you understand that they're looking for fully factored form, and that's going to be this general structure when you factor out this trinomial, then you already know answer choice D is going to be correct. And if you were pressed for time or maybe not sure of how to factor it, you could still get this correct without having to do the factoring itself. We'll factor it out just to show that it works. So here, when you go to factor this out, x squared minus 6x plus 8, you're going to have two factors, and we need to make sure that the sum of those terms is negative 6, and then the product of those terms is positive 8. So you can use your answer choices to your advantage and test those out, but anytime you're factoring, if you're not as comfortable seeing it right away, then a helpful tip is just to write out the factors of 8, and that way it tells you the combinations that you could have. You could have 1 times 8, or you could have 2 times 4. And in order to get 6, there's no way I can combine 1 and 8. No matter which one I make positive or negative, any sign values isn't going to make a difference. I can't come up with 6, but I can see how 2 and 4 could give me 6 in some way, shape, or form. And then I just want to look at the sign and use that to my advantage. So here the sign is a negative, and so that means that I would have to have a negative 4 and a negative 2. And just to double check, negative 4 times negative 2, does that give me my last term, the constant? Does that give me a positive 8? It sure does. And so when we see that those are our correct factors, we can go ahead and confidently pick answer choice D. But even before that, if you understand this piece right here, that x-intercepts of a quadratic means they're looking for that quadratic to be written out in fully factored form, that lets you identify the structure of the correct answer choice without having to do some of the math. Up next, we'll continue in the multiple choice here.